There you go. So yeah, I'm Ryan Dickie. I'm the operations coordinator for the Family Forest Network project. Just a little bit of background for me. I graduated the NREP program through NSCC. Worked a long time mostly as a silviculture contractor. Been definitely hundreds for sure of acres or hectares with the brush saw. Worked with some of the guys at Irving here for a few years as a harvesting supervisor and looking after some of the silviculture program there, and then now with the Family Forest Network. But overall, in my almost 20 years in the woods, almost everything I've done is around small private. So background for us for the Family Forest Network, it's something that was been talked about for a long time, and then really amongst a bunch of the landowner groups really started thinking we need some type of project to look at ecological forestry, especially on private lands. There's lots of research, lots of focus on industrial crown lands. A little bit easier to do research on those sites too, but a real need to actually start looking at this stuff on small private, because the treatments, the approach is similar, but there's unique challenges a lot of times to private land. So in, I think it was about 2021, they really started putting this proposal together. It's amongst the 11 organizations up there as a kind of a collective under one umbrella to look at these. So all the co-ops in the province are kind of our actual service providers. We also work with MTRI has been a big help for us. We do a lot of biodiversity work through them. Abby's been a huge help with some of our smaller projects within a project that I'll talk about in a little bit. So what is ecological forestry? A big one for us is, you can create a definite or multiple definitions, I guess, for ecological forestry that cover, some might say clear cutting can be ecological forestry. So for us it was important. We actually created basically our own definition. So under our FFM project, ecological forestry aims to manage projects in a manner that promotes the development and or restoration of stands back to climax vegetation types that are appropriate for the local landscape, eco-site, and soil conditions, and with consideration of climate change adaptations, needs, and objectives. We just wanted to create that definition that clearly defines exactly what we're working on within our project. So the overview, when we started out, there's a heck of a lot of different vegetation types, soil types, eco-sites, everything within the province, and we needed to kind of narrow our focus so that we didn't want it to be a big hodgepodge of just kind of one-off sites and everything. So what we ended up doing is, with the help of James Steenberg, we went through, and Natural Resources has a lot of data from permanent sample plots, FVC sites from when they actually created the manual. And James was able to give us the information for the occurrences of all the different veg types on private land. We were able to then go through that. There's a lot of unique ones. We don't really need to have, like I said, little one-off sites. We picked all the most common veg types and then went through those ones and picked a whole suite of them that have I guess, challenges. There's some management interpretations to be made there, whether it's early successional sites that we want to get back to late successional, some maybe a little bit later, but there's issues. We've got some of the tolerant hardwood groups and a lot of talk kind of through a lot of the eastern states, Nova Scotia, everything about difficulties with regenerating like sugar maple and stuff, so we wanted to add those sites in as well. So then my big first task when I started the project was actually to come up with our own pre-treatment assessment process, because we knew we wanted to look at a few extra things. So we based everything we did off of the Crown PTA, essentially took everything from that, so it made my job a little bit easier, and then we just tweaked a few things, added a whole bunch of things in. So because we're on private land, tend to be a lot smaller harvest sites, so we actually upped our sampling intensity to 1 plot per every hectare versus 1 to 2 on Crown. It's just an efficiency thing, on a 10 hectare site I can usually get through that in an entire day. If I did it 1 to 2 and only 5 hectares, I'm going to the site for half a day or a little more than half, so it just made sense to do a little bit more intensive sampling. We added a whole bunch of measures in, like we actually do, working with Community Forests International, look at carbon storage within the stand, measure things for stuff like coarse woody material. We actually run transects through that helps inform our harvest prescriptions around whether we actually need to add coarse woody back on some sites. And then added a lot of things for between plot measures, such as like transitions in your forest ecosystem classification, a lot of wildlife biodiversity stuff, ecological growing stock, and ground vegetation too. So ecological growing stock, or EGS, is a category we came up with. So on Crown, when you do, we talk a lot about acceptable and unacceptable growing stock. That's basically whether a tree's healthy and it can grow into it either has a saw log or potentially could grow into a saw log tree, so it'd be acceptable. Unacceptable is everything else, but I always had a little bit of a problem with that, just in that you might have an ugly, in terms of it's not going to make a saw log yellow birch, but if it's an otherwise healthy tree and it's one of the climax trees that you want on that site, calling it unacceptable is a little bit disingenuous, at least for the type of work that we're doing, where it's, we want to grow good volume of high value logs, but we're also worried as much about the ecology of the site. So we still label every tree if it's acceptable or unacceptable, but we created this ecological growing stock as kind of a subcategory to capture the other benefits of some of those trees. So. Like I said, we have carbon and soil, so we actually just do a few extra measures. It's a fairly quick one, and then all that data goes to Community Forest International. They can come back to us with a relatively good idea of how much carbon that site's actually storing, and then I think probably in our post-treatment assessments we'll look at it again, get a good sense of, obviously if you're harvesting you're going to dip down, but then we can potentially do some modeling to say, well, especially on these sites that we're trying to restore, hopefully be able to get them to a point where there'll be a long-term better site and we can store more carbon over the long term. So on our research plots, we actually do some soil collections too. Those go through, are going through DAL. They've got new, I don't even remember the name of them, but new soil samplers. They can give us all kinds of data, and you'll hear with Forest Share project here later today. So some of our soil samples will help with the same information as that one. So, for every site, same as on Crown, we calculate sustainable mean annual increment, which is essentially just to say you can cut this much wood off of the site every year and not impact the nutrient loading basically in the soils. You're not taking away from the soils. So we do a lot of work, especially working with the contractors around like soil damage, hazard classifications if you're on clay soils versus a well-drained coarse soil type, stuff like that. So we're looking at a lot of those. And like I say, collection of soil chemistry data on sites that get our full research plots. So for every site, this would be a little bit of an example of a site where we come up with ecological planning units. So like within a harvest area, you can tend to have some variability. It may be around a little bit different veg type. A lot of times it's usually around drainage classification. So you may have some well-drained, some imperfect. And that can affect your management interpretations of what you want to do. When you may be able to get in there, may have to tell a contractor if you get into the wetter area, you're going to pull more slash under your tracks or anything like that. So they end up all part of the same harvest. The contractors usually don't see this one. They would just see a big map of the area with maybe comments about certain sections and stuff. So my big part of the project, I should mention, so like we kind of have two focuses, like the biological side of things, and we have our project scientist is Kevin Keys. I'm sure most folks have known Kevin over the years. He looks after a lot more of that. My side of things is really based around the economic research. So how much does it actually cost to both harvest these sites, but also cost around planning and stuff like that. Like I said, we've added a lot of extra measures in. It's a little bit more involved to collect the level of data that we're doing, and that has a cost though for landowners. So trying to figure out what each step actually costs, whether they're necessary, or just to give landowners options. So, some things may be important for landowners and they really want to have that data collected. Others may not see it as important and don't want to take on the cost of doing that type of work. So that's really a lot of what I'm looking at. We're trying earlier entries in some of our veg types. We've done like a fairly early entry in some aspen stands. Get into balsam fir sites that are maybe not early entry, but they're 40 years old. Like in the picture there, have never been managed. They're already starting to fall apart, but the wood's not great. But it's if we don't harvest them now, we might never harvest them. And that has implications for silviculture work down the road and stuff like that. So So the biological research, the goal is to fully assess the stands being researched, so it includes on sites that we elect to have the full meal deal for the research. We have 1 hectare control sites, 2 other sites within the harvest area, both 1 hectare, where we actually collect a whole bunch of data, like I said, around soils, but we do like full ground veg plots, all kinds of stuff like that. I'm not the best person to speak on those because I don't get involved in that side of stuff, but and also a lot more focus on a lot more plots for stuff like carbon and coarse food and material and everything too. So one of the big ones actually when we first started this project, we had a lot of folks, ecological forestry, we were definitely more on the environmental sort of side of things with this, and we get asked a whole bunch of times if we were going to observe a singing season for our project, and we kind of kicked it around and talked about it, but having a full-on singing season actually creates a lot of big-time headaches for us on some sites. We don't have frozen winters anymore. Sites that I used to say, okay, well, we're going to cut that in the wintertime. A lot of times you can't get into them now, so in the middle of the summer is actually the best harvest season, best option for those. So instead of that, we actually came up with a protocol for nesting birds to say, this is what we're going to do when we do any type of harvest work through the summertime when the birds may be around, maybe they're nesting. So what we ended up coming up with, we have a whole bunch of steps here. So the first step is always we do a desktop biodiversity assessment. That's where I say MTRI has helped us a lot. They have access to DNR records, ACC, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but they have access to a bunch of records for species at risk, like information that's not publicly available. So we send them a site, they can immediately look it up and say, okay, well, I know there's Canada warbler within 400 meters of there, so then that kind of triggers our thought process, say, okay, well, would they be on this site? Is it appropriate habitat? Maybe if it is, chances are we wouldn't do that harvest through the summer. During our PTAs, at least right now, like any PTA pre-treatment assessment work we do in the summertime, we actually use the Merlin Bird app. Some of us are better than others on staff, so we're like always listening for different bird types and try and have a list of the different ones we find in the lot. Third step, if we decide to go ahead, we deploy ARUs, which these are an audio lot. It's just a listening device. It comes on early in the morning for the dawn chorus and then catches the evening one too. So we put those out for at least 2 weeks on a site, and it'll give us a whole list that we can then run through software and tells us with pretty good accuracy what species we have there. And the big thing we're usually looking for on those ones is any species that have the rank of S1 through 3. So that would be anything from actually endangered to threatened. And part of what we've said is, unless there's really special circumstances where we have to do the work in the summer, if we have S1 through 3 species in there, we're going to defer those harvest sites no matter what. And then again, the other thing we added, so all of our field staff actually have done training around avian nest sweeps and stuff. We tried it last year on some sites. Any site where we do kind of a whole site harvest, if it was a continuous cover or thinning or anything, we had no confidence that we ruled out if there's birds nesting in that area or not. So what we said is, again, we may do some of those harvests under special circumstances, but as a rule, we're only doing gap-based harvests through the summertime. So most of our gaps end up as high retention, so only 1/3 removal. They're only 0.1, 0.2 hectare gaps. It's a lot easier to go right to the middle of that gap. We do the nest sweep on those within 5 days of the harvest starting. And you can kind of sit in the middle. The gaps are only 10, 15 meters across in radius. So you can actually sit there for 10 or 15 minutes and feel reasonably confident that there's nothing there. And then also when we supervise the site, we still walk through as the harvest is going on, looking for it's almost impossible to find a nesting bird, but you can see nesting activity, whether they're carrying sticks, birds with insects in the mouth or anything like that. It's a good sign that they're probably taking those back to a nest. And we deferred a few harvests last year. We had a few that we thought maybe there was some sensitive species on the outside, and then actually found a few nests, like as we were doing the harvest and ruled a few portions out. So we got smaller harvesting equipment. I get 2 of my contractors who mentioned, I'm sorry I didn't put any pictures of you here, but this is Cody from Ox Resources who's here today. With his small harvester, these things have been amazing for small private. A lot of landowners don't necessarily want to cut a lot. A lot of folks don't have a lot of wood to cut. And unless you've got that 500-600 at least tons of wood, it's hard to bring in full-size gear. I have no problem with the big gear. There's some great contractors you can do just as good work with that sort of stuff, but especially with partial harvesting, there's really low volumes for these sites. So having small equipment that's able to, they might only need 200 or 300 tons through the run of a week to get them through it. It's been a big help. And then also the other big one, with that harvester and his small border, Cody, we had any more than 4 days downtime, I think, after a couple rainstorms. But you just don't get the impact with ground pressure or anything. So we work great through the spring. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can talk loud. That's no problem. So in terms of harvest prescriptions, we run all of our sites through the SGM and determine treatments right away. For some sites, we actually just accept what's in the SGM. It makes the most sense. For others, good treatments, but especially with small private, we're trying to be extra careful on a lot of small private sites. Just around, if you've got a 100-acre woodlot and you're a little bit aggressive with your harvest and then lose it in a windstorm, I mean, you can lose anything in a windstorm anyway. But we're trying to be maybe a little bit less, to do a little bit lower rate of extraction. So we run them through that. The other thing we do is we have a whole bunch of metrics we look at around like natural disturbance regimes, trying to recreate what would naturally happen there. Like I said, coarse woody material, sometimes, not often, but sometimes we will have like an old field white spruce site. Sometimes you get into those and it's just a moss, carpet of moss, and there's no dead wood or anything. We'll actually give contractors like a target to say, a lot of times it'd just be me, I'll mark a bunch of trees, paint CWM on it. Contractor, so I just want you to knock that down and leave it there. We're not going to process any of it. So, and then the other one we have is we have a big preference for gap, or at least like in some of our hardwood sites, we'll do a little bit of gap, a little bit of thinning. It better, on most sites, it better recreates natural disturbance regimes anyway, and at least in our opinion, tend to be more wind firm. So this is way too small to put on there. It's more of a reminder for me. This would be one of our harvest prescriptions, so you can see things on there. So climate adaptations, natural disturbance, restoration. We also do a development trajectory, so we run all these sites with the PTA, do the FEC work, kind of figure out where, if it was left alone, where that site's going to want to get to. And we actually kind of build out like a recommended trajectory for where we want to, still not working? Yeah, for where we want to get these to eventually, just so it's like, I can explain to the landowner, this is why I'm doing the treatment, this is where we want to take it, and then that'll help them. They may not work with me next time, but they have this prescription to say, this was the initial goal of the treatment, and this is where we want to take it, so the next person working with them might be able to help out with that. For planting, we're partnered with Thriving Forest. We're going to do We're going to do we're part of the 2 Billion Trees project. We haven't started on it yet, so I just picture my son and I wrote last fall planting some red spruce we picked, so he's my #1 tree planter so far, but he works for, he'll work for applesauce poachers, so it's not bad. One of the big things we're doing with our planting, a lot of sites are really lacking in tolerant hardwood, so we're going to do a lot of tolerant hardwood planting. It's like obscenely expensive to do things that way. It's also time intensive. You got to put tree to some type of protection, otherwise you're just feeding deer basically. So our goal with them, it's more of a restoration planting where we'll plant 20 or 30 larger stock hardwoods per hectare, usually within the gaps or anything, just to try and get the seed source back. So we're not fixing everything, but in 50, 60 years when those trees become viable again, there'll be a seed source for that site. So, some other sites, we'll actually do regen assessments with some of them. They would actually fall through Paul talking before we can.
It's off again. Just talk loud.
Yeah. So some of the sites we have may actually just be able to run through ASF for regular planting type stuff. So, but we haven't. We'll start doing our reassessments on those sites this year. So. Climate adaptation, this is actually from a project that we did last fall, maybe I was involved with it. Kevin, along with Dr. Sherry Andrews-Key, she's with UBC, came over and we did some climate vulnerability assessments, hoping to make some recommendations just for we know it's getting warmer, trying to figure out maybe some management interpretations for different sites on different veg types and everything about what you should be specifically doing to get ready for climate change. So. And then just some of the other stuff we've done, like Paul said again, drones. We've got 2 of the Mavic 3 drones, so they're a little bit of a higher end one. We actually fly all of our sites, and we get we create digital orthomosaic images, so like same as Google Earth or anything, but we fly our sites at 200 feet. Great camera on those. Some sites, you get a gap in trees, I can zoom in and I can tell you what species of fern are growing on the site just from my drone imagery. So they've been great for a lot of stuff like that. We're doing some browse trials on our hardwood sites. So we'll plant some trees just kind of out there on their own, see what the browse level is with those, look at planting in tree tubes. One of the other things we're doing is brush piles with the hope that maybe we can do some planting inside those brush piles and use like the brush, big hardwood tops and stuff as a natural barrier for deer, which is what happens naturally on sites too. You get some hardwood blow down, big tree comes down. The deer are lazy browsers. They'll eat around the outside, but they won't necessarily eat on the inside. So then if you get some seedlings coming up there, they tend to be protected. Hoping we haven't started yet. Hoping we'll do some kind of basic FDC training with our contractors, just around, if I tell them what soil type is there, interpretations, it's nice that they understand what we're doing with those. Creating some best management practices docs specific to our project. One of the cool ones that I've done, I just got interested and bought a 360 camera, so I actually just put it on my shoulder and I can take it out and walk around the woods. And it creates a video where you can click on the screen and look around. And it's been especially nice with, not everyone can get out and come for a walk in the woods with me or anything. They can't go and walk through a harbor site and see everything, but if I have that camera, I'm actually able to create some videos for landowners to show them what's going on in the woods if they're not able to get out there. And then the other big one we went through last year with through NSCC and the community forest and took the Ontario tree markers course, so all of our staff are certified now, and especially on our hardwood sites and some of our pine sites, we're doing full-scale tree marking, paint all the trees we want the contractors to cut. So that was everything. I think Christy will probably do the same as we do with Paul. If you've got questions or anything, I'm going to stick around. I'll hang out here for a few minutes, and then I'll be around for lunchtime too. So.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ryan. We appreciate that. Good job.
Yeah.